Mine recording. Right. Hello, everybody. It's so great when you can deliver a presentation and not really be like nervous or like, oh, I have to like be on my P's and Q's. It's like a bunch of people I already know, so I love it. So welcome everybody. Hi, Carrie. I see you popping in. Okay, so 10 steps to launch a recruiting operation. Thank you for your patience as we've rescheduled this a couple of times. In all honesty, we're trying to fit in other like really exciting speakers in and around us. So we wanted to make sure to get those people in and we could fit ourselves in anytime. Also, last week we were both very sick, so apologies for that. But we're really excited to come and really have more of a mind share, collaborative conversation. I know some of us here touch rec ops. So we'd love your input and kind of, best practices as it relates to any of these steps. I will say neither myself or Tammy are experts in rec ops, disclaimer, but I love it. I geek out on it. I want that to be the thing that I do all the time in recruiting. I have kind of like grown out of the full cycle recruiting process and really love tapping into processes, programs, people efficiencies. And so I ended up writing this ebook called 10 Steps to Launch a Recruiting Operation. And then Tammy and I were chatting and she said, there's a lot of times with her clients through Rabble that she's, coaching them on various different steps as part of this process. Tammy, I'll let you fill them in a little bit more, but there was a lot of synergies there in terms of our experience working with, our prior companies or clients on various aspects of recruiting operations. So we ended up taking the ebook and putting it into a presentation. So here we are. So really the goal is this is stuff that's more so relevant when you're small or an early stage company. So you could be like a small mom and pop company, small business been around for 30 years, doesn't have a recruiting department, an early stage startup that doesn't have any recruiting, or maybe there's one IC recruiter and they're looking to elevate in their careers and really bring more rec ops strategy to their department, to their roles. So again, this isn't necessarily meant to be for larger organizations because obviously they do this on steroids, they have bigger budgets and whatnot, but we wanted to just kind of put together best practices on like kind of baseline framework. So that is what today's premise is all about. You obviously know us, so I'm going to skip this. But for anybody who doesn't know us, maybe Nicole, I haven't met you yet. But I'm specifically Natalie. Tammy, I'll let you introduce yourself in a second. You guys know me. I don't need to introduce myself, but outside of Talent Collective, my day or maybe even my night job at this point is Talent Refinery, where myself and actually Krista, now we embed into small businesses and startups as fractional TA leaders. So we'll help fill in those interim gaps. We can help manage people, take care of projects, audit their recruiting operations, and in some cases doing their end-to-end recruiting as well. So that's Talent Refinery, my other beloved child of a company. And Tammy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. I think I've met almost everyone. But my name's Tammy Dane. I'm the CEO and founder at Rabble Recruiting. What we do is specialize in embedded recruiters and HR professionals and ops as well. Folks like office managers, EAs. We've been branching out into that space as well this year. So we parachute these folks in on demand. And as Natalie was saying earlier, we found out when we met that there's a lot of synergies with our businesses and things that have come up with our clients. And obviously, we'll be talking about the aspects of recruiting operations, these 10 steps that we touch quite often with our clients. So it's been really fun to leverage the work that Natalie did in her ebook and put it into this format together and bring it to you guys today. So just really excited to chat with you guys about all of the things. And I think we're going to go really quickly into the agenda just so that you have a bit of the roadmap. Oh, that's right. We did already kind of mention a little bit like, who is this for? But it's for all of you guys. Someone like Natalia, who's at a very small early stage startup that might not have all of the components of recruiting operations built out. This is designed to give you a baseline of where to go, what to start building if you're starting from scratch, or hopefully you'll have takeaways on what to refine or build out if you don't have recruitment marketing, etc. So in terms of our agenda, we're going to go over common recruiting challenges, where you might be at with your clients. If you're Larissa, challenges that you're hearing, or Pauline, challenges that you will hear when you start to interview again. We're going to go over the actual 10 steps to launch a recruiting operations and what you have to do. Really importantly, towards the end, we're going to go over how to audit your current recruiting operations to see where you're currently at, and then devise a plan on how to tackle or build out aspects of your recruiting operation that you might be missing. Most importantly, we're going to go over when to ask for help if you fit into that bucket and you might need help doing some of these things. And then Q&A. We'll have plenty of time to ask questions. But like we were saying, this is a small group today, so we could keep it light and conversational. So if you have a question, just chime in on any of these topics as we go.
Backwards. There we go. Okay, so as just a landscape, we first wanted to look at like, well, how do we know that there's signs that it's actually time to hire, especially in a small organization? This slide was really helpful and relevant, like when we're working with early stage founders or first time founders that are really tackling hiring on their own and they aren't really an expert in the recruiting discipline. So this is not necessarily going to be anything new for this community. But some of the top 8 reasons that we saw from an Indeed survey from back in December 2022 was these 8 top things. So obviously having high employee turnover, you may also want to like take a look at your culture. So that could be a bigger issue and challenge there. Let's say that there is a pivot in the direction of the company, a new product launch, something that requires a unique skill set, a special skill that your current workforce doesn't currently have. Let's just say you're growing and scaling, or there's seasonality in your business. So there's an inability to be able to take on new clients or keep up with the clients that you currently have. That might be an indication that you should hire more people or consider, some sort of embedded or temporary solution to really be able to support the influx in business. Also, if there's customer complaints, right, that all kind of like goes in together. If you're not servicing your clients very well, that naturally might turn into customer challenges. So you may want to consider adding additional headcount. Extending deadlines, same premise, right? You're not really able to service your clients and your business and the deadline commitments that you've made to your customers. So again, more need for more workforce and talent. That talent then is becoming overworked, lots of overtime. There's an increase in the amount of overtime that they're putting in if, they're not a salaried employee, and or they're a salaried employee and you just see that they're working a lot. You really should consider additional hires at that time. Falling short on internal goals, like maybe you're missing specific milestones in your roadmap. Maybe you have specific KPIs or initiatives that you want to roll out that you're falling short on meeting. And then the last one, no time off in months. So your people are not getting the time off that they need. You as leaders in your organization are not getting the time off that you need. This could have a larger impact on your culture and overall people engagement. So another good time to consider hiring. Again, this is not necessarily new for you guys, but maybe some things that you could leverage in any conversations with your leadership if you end up, hitting some of these roadblocks.
100%. So as Natalie was saying, if that's describing you or just something you can kind of keep in the back of your mind for the future, if you ever need that firepower justification to hire or go out there and start recruiting, you'll hopefully be in a place then to want to revamp your recruiting operations and put together these 10 steps or launch these 10 steps to get your recruiting operation in order. So we love a good spoiler alert. So we don't want to keep you hanging and wonder what the 10 steps are. We want to actually tell you what the 10 steps are at the beginning of the presentation. So you just have that foundation as we go throughout. So we're going to first talk about workforce planning, then move on to capacity planning. We're going to talk about the recruiting tech stack and what that looks like today, employer branding, how to do recruitment marketing and launch that. Of course, we're going to talk about the candidate experience, interview training, employee referral program. We're going to talk about recruitment data. And then, of course, last but not least, and very importantly, we're going to talk about how you can move your organization from a reactive hiring state, which is where most folks are at, to a proactive hiring state. And then, of course, the importance of continuous evaluation. So these are the 10 steps that we're going to walk you guys through now.
And also, one just like fun plug for Talent Collective here is we really are making a concerted effort to like have these 10 pillars really be a lot of the content and the subject matter expertise that we bring to the community in terms of thought leadership, workshop presenters, fireside conversations, because I personally see a lot of these as those 10 benchmark kind of like must-haves, those essential pillars of the recruiting function. And so just so you guys all know, as members, these are things that we're like hyper excited about bringing more thought leadership to the community. So more to come on that. We've already had some in some of these areas, so that's been fun. Okay, workforce planning. Raise of hand with emojis. Who has some experience in workforce planning? Or you could just say it out loud. There's only 5 of us. Some. Okay, I can't see everybody. Sierra, yeah. And Sierra, great. All right. So this is new for most of us then. So what is workforce planning? At its crux, it really is a bird's eye view. I mean, it's much bigger than just, a general view, but it's an overall analysis of your current workforce. Plainest layman's terms, who do we currently have butts in seats that currently is providing skills and talent to the organization? Let's look at what they contribute. What are their skills? What's their potential to like grow with the organization? Number one. Number two, what are our forecasted needs? So based on your product roadmap, pivots in your business or seasonality, or you're launching something new, whatever those kind of changes are in your business functions, your initiatives, your goals and objectives for the organization. What's the forecast that we need in terms of the right skills, the amount of people, the locations of these individuals, and the availability of that talent? And then lastly is, what is our strategy and action plan going to be to make sure that we're set up for success, to be able to support and cultivate the talent that's already there, and then attract additional talent that we need, and then onboard and embed that new talent in with the rest of the organization, and then to be able to meet those milestones for your organizational growth. So it is a really fun process. We just had a fireside on this a couple of weeks ago. The panelists were really informative in terms of like how to think about this, how far in advance. Typically you see a lot of this is happening in like end of Q3, having additional conversations in Q4 of a year, but you're planning your workforce plan for the new year because you obviously want to give yourself enough lead time. So that is in the most basic 1-minute definition of workforce planning. But the biggest takeaways here are there are also critical roles that are necessary a part of your organization, especially in my experience, if you're a venture-backed startup company. Your VC will oftentimes make recommendations and or highly suggest that you consider prioritizing these critical hires. So that's anything in the executive C-suite level, your technical product and end roles, anything revenue generating, depending on kind of the stage of your business. And then the people team. Of course, we are highly important and highly needed. So I made sure to include us on this list because if they aren't prioritizing us, they should be. So I consider these as the four like hypercritical buckets that you should be thinking about in your workforce plan as you're planning for the future. So moving on. And if anybody has any questions along the way, just chime in. Oops, I keep going backwards. All right, so then capacity planning. Tammy, I think this
Perfect. Yes.
is
So after you go through your workforce planning exercise, as Natalie walked you through, ideally you move next to a capacity planning exercise. Capacity planning, as it relates to what we're talking about, is basically figuring out the resources and talent that you need internally to actually make those hires happen. This is an exercise that rarely takes place, I feel like, at small organizations, especially one that doesn't have a recruiting or people ops function built out. That's why when Natalie and I were talking about, putting this in presentation format, I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to speak to this, because this is where I spend a lot of my time talking with my clients about this, is literally talking about their roles and their hiring goals monthly or quarterly, and how to obviously realize those in terms of the talent that you need and recruiters and support that you need to fill it. So the $1 million question that I get a lot of times from my clients is, I need to hire, make 20 hires. How many recruiters do I need? And my answer inevitably always is, it depends, because it depends on all of these factors that you see on the slide. It depends on the complexity of the roles, how quickly you want to hire, the size of your company, the resources that may or may not be available to those recruiters, sourcing tools, additional support like coordinating or sourcing, of course, market and economic conditions, how in demand are the roles or people that you need to recruit and bring to your organization, how difficult is it going to be to recruit them? Of course, the actual recruiter's bandwidth. Are they a part-time recruiter and they're also doing part of the time HR? So how much time are they actually getting to dedicate to recruiting? And of course, changing hiring demands. Are you constantly going to be reprioritizing the roles and having them chase different balls? So a way to go through the capacity planning exercise in a really thoughtful way is through this worksheet that Natalie created that goes with her ebook, which is awesome. In a perfect state, you use an Excel worksheet similar to this that will lay out the hires that need to be made that you just concluded based off of your workforce planning exercise. And you lay out those hires, the number of hires that you need by quarter. And then obviously, once you look at the number of hires that you need to make by quarter, that's when you can determine how many recruiters or the type of recruiting talent and support that you need to make those hires actually happen. Now, I told you, it depends is the answer to, how many recruiters you need to make as many hires as, you're talking about quarterly, but there are some generalizations that I do often talk about with clients. Everyone's going to say something slightly different, but generally these are the numbers that you will hear and can probably agree with and get behind. A full-time go-to-market recruiter or corporate recruiter can typically carry a load of somewhere between 12 and 20 recs. That is a wide range on purpose because, again, that asterisk is there because it depends on if they have any coordinating or sourcing support. And again, how difficult are these roles? Are 10 of these roles, BDR roles, so they're really just sourcing one profile, or, are they all 20 different recs, right? Like 10 different recs, and are some of them actually even director or VP level, which a whole different level of firepower would need to go into fulfilling recruiting for those roles. So there is a ton of variety in there, but in general, that is a key takeaway for you to keep in the back of your mind as like an industry standard. On the technical side, the technical recruiters in the house, hopefully Natalia will really agree with and get behind a much lower industry average for rec load for a technical recruiter. So you'll hear, if you were to ask any random technical recruiter what they think a full rec load ought to be, typically somewhere between 4 and 7, 5 to 9. That's the most I've ever heard for a full-time technical recruiter. But again, it depends on if they have any support that's available to them as far as coordinating or sourcing. All of that needs to be layered on to what will be doable to recruit in a quarter, depending again on their other responsibilities and resources. And also to layer on top of that, it's going to take at least 6 to 8 weeks to get anyone through any typical recruiting process. So it's both art and science. I hope you're kind of seeing that as, you know, the main takeaway here with this capacity planning exercise.
Love it.
And I think we'll go on to the recruiting tech stack next, which very nicely kind of dovetails into what we were just talking about and why it's the natural step. Once you figure out, you know, how many recruiters you need or the recruitment team that you need in place in order to actually make the hires that you need to quarterly, the next step is to actually look at your recruiting tech stack, because just like any, you know, engineer or marketer or salesperson that has their tech stack that's available to them, recruiters, obviously, we all need our tech stack in order to be efficient as well. So the tech stack includes everything from an applicant tracking system to communication and collaboration tools, job boards, job aggregators, and then of course, any screening and assessment tools, things of that nature that might be on there. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, obviously, we've laid out some very common or the most common tech tools, recruiting tech tools that are out there that probably many of you have experience using. It's really important to make a really good decision when it comes to adding tech tools to your repertoire, because it's what's obviously mission critical to, you know, your success or not as you're recruiting various roles. We did design this presentation for, you know, obviously smaller startups or smaller companies that are typically budget constrained, especially during the season. Everyone can probably relate to that phrase. So our key takeaway here, if that's you or you might be interviewing at small startups, the recommendation that I often give when I'm explaining to clients that they need to provide our recruiters and recruiters in general with tech tools in order for them to be successful, I always get, well, bare minimum, what do I have to have? So our bare minimum takeaway, if that describes your situation, is at least an applicant tracking system and a LinkedIn light seat, which doesn't get you far enough, but at least it's something for the cost. I actually think it's like $180 now. It's gone up, but still a far cry from what the corporate seats generally do cost. So that always is our recommendation as far as a quick and dirty way to get a recruiting tech stack stood up, is to start with those two items.
And I will also preface in here that even since putting in this image, there's just so much more technology and tools that come out so rapidly. Now all of them are AI focused. So I'd almost say, like, ignore this. It needs to be updated, but there's just so much. And another thing that we're really, really passionate about bringing more to Talent Collective is partners. Specifically, we are targeting partners and sponsors, of course, that are in the recruiting technology space, so that you guys are constantly in the know about recruiting innovation, upcoming tools and technology. So you kind of get like a very basic, quick kind of vetting of, okay, if Talent Collective has gone through the conversation, we've beta tested some of these tools, and if we're recommending them as partners through the platform, then they might be worth your time to consider. So we're actually making a concerted effort to kind of weed through some of that for you guys. We have some really cool additional partners coming up. I won't spoil anything, but there's a couple on here that I'm very excited about. But outside of that, there are many on here that we're currently beta testing that are not on the list, that are, you know, up and coming and pretty decent. So more to come here, but as a basic framework, if you needed some justification to take to your leadership on, like, hey, at a minimum, I need some of these tools, hopefully that'll be helpful for you.
One last point, actually, Natalie, because I think you made a really good one about that now there's this whole wave, obviously, that we're talking a lot about at Talent Collective with AI. Right now, I think the conversation when it comes to AI tools is it's a nice to have, but I think very soon it's going to become a must have, So just keep that in the back of your mind as recruiters, because it's going to become, I think, just mission critical to do your job, to just be competitive at all as recruiters. And we're going to have more information about those tools that I think are going to be coming, again, like the mission critical tools versus nice to have. So anyways, just a plug for that.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So those first couple of sections are kind of the essentials, right? Like the basics that you need or should be standing up as part of your recruiting function. These next couple of things, I like to say is like the fun stuff, or the like cherries on top, the nice to haves, but you can get by without having them. But that does not mean that they don't provide imminent value. Matter of fact, I would say tomorrow's Wednesday, is the virtual fireside that we're having with a couple ladies on how to continue providing recruiting value even when hiring is slow. So I hope they touch on some of these other pillars, because these are other things that we could be iterating or standing up when we have the benefit of more time right now. So anyways, a little plug for that fireside tomorrow, but these are some of the fun things that you can also do. So employer branding at its basic core is very similar to consumer marketing, right? How does a company attract prospects and consumers to their organization? It's through their brand. So I like to see this very similarly. It's how do we attract talent to our organization by our employee value proposition, our benefits, our reputation. It's all the same, right? They're the consumers of us as recruiters, right? We need them. We want them a part of our organization. So the employer brand is really key in attracting top talent, even retaining the talent that you have, really like what's in it for them? What's the employee value proposition again? How do you ensure that they're maintaining satisfaction and engagement with the organization? And then maintaining a positive reputation, right? Glassdoor is our best or worst enemy, but it is the reality. It's like Yelp for businesses. It's the same here in the candidate market. So the better your employer brand, candidate experience, candidate engagement, the better your reputation and the easier it will be to attract talent. I actually have a reverse negative experience of this, in which I joined a Series B startup. I was the first TA hire as head of talent, and I was put in a position to essentially fly the plane while I was building it. So there was no recruiters, no infrastructure, there was nothing, just lever ATS with one seat. And I was tasked with doubling the company in size in a 6-month period of time. Granted, I did it, I pulled it off, hired an embedded team, I got employer branding stood up, I got recruitment marketing, a bunch of other things, but we were moving so fast and kind of like band-aiding a lot of things that it eventually ended up hurting our candidate experience, which then dominoed over to bad Glassdoor reviews, which then brought it back to candidates questioning why they should show up for their interviews if the organization is just not good. So that was a great learning lesson for me, and especially one where I was like, I will never do that again, and I will take a seat at the table and make sure that my future employers understand the importance of brand and reputation that could really help or hinder your recruiting process. Oh, and this diagram here are just some of the things that you can think about when you're trying to put together employee value proposition, right? It can be monetary, it could be perks, it could be benefits, but it could also be like growth and culture and your values. So this is just kind of a quick sheet on just some ideas to think about. Okay, recruitment marketing. So this dovetails into employer branding. Once you kind of know, like, what is our value proposition? What is the brand that we're trying to stand up to attract, retain, and maintain a good reputation? Well, then you're going to want to dovetail that into your recruitment marketing and advertising efforts. And this is really the more tactile ways in which you're going to promote your brand to get the inbound. So the way that I differentiate recruitment marketing from advertising is advertising. You're typically trying to just attract talent to your immediate openings for relevant positions that you're trying to fill right now, where recruitment marketing is more like a long-term play, right? Again, this is very similar to a sales process in which like companies might do webinars and other kind of like branding marketing activities, but it's a long-term play. You're really just trying to get your brand out there and market it, where they might actually pay Google ad dollars to advertise a product that they're trying to sell today to meet a quota. It's similar in that capacity. So over here are some recommendations on different things that you can do in different buckets of recruitment, marketing, and advertising. I won't go through all of these. You can obviously see the list, but the biggest takeaway here is maybe pick one or two components of each of these sections and just do what you feel is necessary for your size and stage of organization, or your budgets, right? These things typically cost money. Not all of them do. At a minimum, the thought leadership typically doesn't cost money, but it does take time. Your branding is more of that bigger long-term play. Candidate attraction are kind of the things you need to get your jobs filled. So just consider a couple things. At a minimum, a career page is always great. That company, again, that I was working at, no career page. I literally had to work with the head of engineering to create a career page to post the jobs. Like, we talk about old school. I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? So that is number one, first best place to start, but plenty of other things here.
Perfect. So once you've done amazing employer branding, you've done the marketing, and now you have this nice full candidate pipeline, and you have candidates that are applying to your company and want to come through your process. Obviously, the next step is to make sure that you've evaluated your candidate experience and their interview path to make sure that they're going to have a really great experience once they come through to meet you, because of course you don't want all that work to just go out the window. So Natalie's created from the ebook another really great checklist sort of question guide that you see here on the right hand side of the screen that will help you through just asking you questions, different components about the interview process to make sure that you've thought about the most important things that create a really great interview experience or not for your candidates. Just to go through a couple of them, things like, is your career page easy to find, and is it mobile ready? And Natalie's just a recent example, she's like, I can't even find the career page, so I need to start there and create one to actually answer that question. Very simple things like, how long is your application process? Is it more than 1 to 2 minutes? And one just quick how-to, go through your own process like you are an applicant. Apply on LinkedIn, apply direct through your career page, and see what experience they're having. And always do that periodically, because things break, by the way. I can't even tell you how many times I did that internally and found out something was broken or something was off. So just think about the candidate experience from their lens so that you can adapt it and make changes as you need to make sure they're having a really, awesome experience throughout. The main takeaway, or the thing we want to leave you with, as again, to one of Natalie's points that she made earlier, some of these things will take time and they can be really big projects. Like creating a career page is a huge project. But one mini takeaway that actually has a huge impact is to actually just think about the interview path that you currently have for each role that you're recruiting for, and make sure it's appropriate for that role. I know Natalie and I have seen this with so many of our clients, that they might have like a BDR, meeting everyone at the company, and they think, oh, we're a startup, we're taking hiring seriously. So they think it's a good thing to have, someone meet everyone at the company, but it's very inefficient, and it's actually not a good use of everyone's time. Your CTO should not be meeting a BDR. They should be out there building product and doing more important things. So just make sure your interview path is appropriate for each role that you're recruiting for, because it's certainly a strong business case for that. And this dovetails really nicely into, number 7, which is to conduct interview training. So once you feel good about the interview path that you have laid out for all of the roles that you're recruiting for, it's imperative to conduct interview training. It should almost be criminal to have people interviewing for a company if they have not been through interview training. Also because they might not be being effective brand ambassadors for your company. But also from a legal and compliance perspective, they might not know certain things that they can say and not say. And as the recruiters and HR representatives for our companies, we have to make sure that we're protecting our company and that they are trained accordingly. So some of the most important reasons that you could put in front of leadership if you feel like you're going to hit an impasse if you suggest this, and this is something that you want to implement at your organization, is that everyone needs to be well versed in what the legal requirements and discrimination laws are. People need to be educated about cultural differences, interview best practices in general. As a part of this process and creating interview training, a component of it, of course, needs to be creating interview guides so that people aren't just going in there and asking whatever question that they want. And then, of course, interview scorecards are matched as well with each role, and that everyone's being evaluated fairly. It's extremely important that is rolled out and that happens. This does take a ton of time. If you've ever been a part of an organization that has rolled it out, or you're currently in that process, it does take a ton of time. Start small. So our pro tip here is something that can really help you out when it comes to creating the interview guides. HireGuide is a super cool company that will actually give you 25 free interview guides for any roles that you're looking for. They pretty much have a guide for every role, which is fantastic. So if you need more than 25, you will have to pay after that, but 25 will get you really far, especially for the roles that you are hiring for over and over again. So yeah, extremely important, guys. Natalie and I do a lot of this work with our clients as well. So if this is something that you're already feeling a little overwhelmed with, just know you have support if you need it, if this is you.
Awesome. Okay. Employee referral programs. Again, this is a nice to have, but it's actually a really, really nice thing to have. It can really help fill that top of funnel pipeline for talent. Obviously, again, in this room of professionals, this is no surprise. But some of the things that I just quickly want to highlight here is some of the things to think about when you're creating a referral program, right? Like, we can say we want to have one, but these are some of the elements that we find to be really effective. Really, number one, starting at the top. Do you have executive buy-in? Are they sponsoring the rollout of the program? And really, it would be ideal if it came from them, the messaging came from them, because it would really get everybody, hopefully, on board. Especially then, it could really help move the needle with hiring managers. I sometimes feel like hiring managers are the ones that really want the talent very quickly, but they're not really sure how to even leverage their own networks or encourage their teams to be leveraging their own networks. So the more that you can help set up your hiring managers with a referral program and their teams, the quicker it will be to fill their roles. Obviously, your new hires, maybe wait a little bit till the honeymoon phase has passed, because you want it to be really genuine and authentic. Asking them for referrals, but they are a great brand ambassador. Any swag, rewards, monetary or not, never hurts. It could be something very, very small up to something very, very big. I've worked at companies that had just swag and some that paid $5,000 per salesperson. I'm like, okay, how many people do I know? But recruiters were not allowed to earn, so that was a bummer. But you could be very generous with this. And then participation incentives. So you could do like some gamification with it, right? Have a scoreboard or highlight people in a newsletter. Thank you so much. Johnny has referred like 5 people this week. And then a feedback loop. It's so important for your people that are referring individuals to like know what happened to those individuals. So make sure there's a transparent way for them to know or keep them updated. Okay. Next is my favorite, data and analytics. I'm such a nerd for numbers. I love Excel spreadsheets, and I'm all about metrics and trying to monitor people and process performance. I think it's really key in identifying gaps and opportunities within your funnels, with the tools that you use, gaps with your hiring managers, comparing benchmark data to, the industry or your competitors. Helps you really tighten up your budgets as well, like stop spending money on things that aren't generating an ROI. So those are just some of the ways that I've used data and analytics. There's obviously a very big list of various different KPIs and metrics that you can put into the process. So feel free to, find that cheat sheet in the workbook. It's actually in Talent Collective's platform. But at a minimum, if you're looking to track some things, our biggest takeaway here is obviously time to hire, hires by source, fill ratio. Those are kind of like your three basics that you should be considering.
Okay, last but not least, number 10, proactive hiring and evaluation. So one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, that it's very common to have a reactive hiring process. To be honest, a lot of the recruiting we do is very reactive at Rabble. So I sympathize with this exponentially. But it's also evergreen as well, that there's always certain positions that we should be recruiting, and we are recruiting at Rabble, so that we have a steady stream of talent that's coming in the door that's a good fit for the needs that we're recruiting for. And that's the definition of proactive, is identifying, what positions at your company are you always, or should you always be recruiting for? Maybe given the nature of the role, something like a BDR position, it's very common for those entry level early career roles to have high turnover, because talent only wants to stay in those roles for a year or two tops, and they'll naturally either move on to another company or should be getting promoted up if they're, really good at what they do. So identifying what roles should you always be recruiting for, and then also having the ongoing conversations with finance and executive leadership and hiring managers to understand the quarter beyond and even next year, where their hiring is going to be, really, again, to bring it full circle, the workforce planning exercise to get ahead and recruit in advance what needs are going to be coming up for your organization. So that's the goal state. Once you get there, it's also important to constantly iterate. It's one of my favorite parts of doing what we do, right? It's boring to just do quarter after quarter the same old thing. I want to do something different, and I certainly want to do it better. There are, of course, a lot of very comprehensive ways that you can evaluate what you're doing and if it's successful or not. A lot of that has to do with what Natalie just went over in terms of tracking various metrics and components of the work that you're doing, evaluating marketing analytics. Is the marketing effective that you're doing on LinkedIn versus Glassdoor, etc.? But in the absence of the bandwidth to do that granular of evaluation, which is the reality of most of our jobs, what we recommend is, at minimum, an end of quarter review. When I was leading my team, this was always on the calendar, so we didn't forget to do it. At the end of every quarter, we would meet the next week, all get in the room, and we would ask ourselves two very simple questions. We did, build it out at a later date and get a little bit more complex with our evaluation. But the core of what we did was just ask ourselves two questions. What did we do last quarter that went great and that we did really well? And then number two, what needs to be improved? What didn't go well, and what do we need to change, maybe remove entirely, or fix or iterate on? And if you ask yourself those two questions, with your team and with important stakeholders, you're going to be light years ahead of most recruiting departments that aren't having those conversations. So that's that, and on to auditing.
Yay. Okay, so this really rounds out the conversation, those are all kind of your 10 pillars. And so we wanted to put together a way for you to just very simply audit your own rec ops. And especially for those that may be a little bit inexperienced in this area, this is really just a good framework to help you remember the areas that you should be considering as part of your recruiting function. But at a minimum, it's a great way to audit anything that you currently have. So it's a simple rating system like workforce plan, 1, 2, or 3. Is it missing? It's a 1. If we're really good at it, it's a 3. And then you can just kind of have a bird's eye view of what your areas for opportunity are and what are you doing well. So feel free to leverage this. This is also a template in the toolbox on our platform, but this is one of my favorite things to do. And it's a great exercise to go through with a team. Maybe you book like a little offsite for a day and you go through each of these things and you talk through them. And figure out from there, based on the things that need improvement or what you're doing well or things that you guys aren't even touching yet at all, what do you want to pick as maybe some of your initiatives for the next quarter, and how are you going to then build a roadmap around that? So I hope this exercise is really easy and fun for you and your team.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me okay, Natalie?
Yeah, it's a little low.
Okay.
But we can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll power through. How to switch microphones there. But yeah, so after you were done with that audit, which is obviously mission critical, so that you know where to spend your time, you could end up feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and it is important to know what your options are and where you, and how you can ask for help. So we wanted to just bring this conversation back, full circle, that it's extremely popular for obvious reasons to bring on fractional or embedded support to kind of fill in the gaps where you might not have budget to hire someone full time to be your recruiting operations guru. Well, maybe you can bring Natalie on for 10 hours a week to do that, or work with a fractional team member. What we do obviously is embedded work, and embedded recruiters or HR professionals to do that part-time or full-time. So you have options, you're not alone, and there are cost-effective solutions to get things done these days. I'm certainly thrilled about that.
Yes. And with that, we are done. Any questions, comments? I'd love to hear like maybe any pain points that you guys, or wins that you guys currently have in your recruiting operations function, or any questions.
Or feedback as well. What was like the most useful parts to you as well, is just something I'd be curious to hear. Thanks, Pauline.
It's Natalia here. I liked that it was very comprehensive. I mean, it's one of those things that I certainly would like to go over the slides again, just to really pause and think about some of the things. But the fact that it was comprehensive to evaluate your rec ops was really helpful. But there will be slides, right, that I can look over later?
Yes.
Perfect.
In the toolbox is each of the templates that you saw in the presentation. They're all in there individually. There's also a link to what I call the workbook. So it's all of those templates in one big workbook. And then we'll be sure to upload the slides as well.
Thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah, I have a question. Are you getting any sense how AI might be tweaking some of the steps that you outlined? I know everything is like it's moving so fast and evolving, but any insight or thoughts around that?
I'll take a stab at answering that, and then I want to hear what Natalie says. It's going to affect all of them. There's still going to need to be a human, obviously, making a decision around what the tech stack needs to be, evaluating the AI marketing tools that you're using or deploying. So it's certainly going to affect the components within every step. But the steps themselves aren't going to change. That's just like my knee-jerk reaction without going through like each one line by line. But I'd be curious to hear what Natalie thinks.
Yeah, I agree. I think AI will impact all of them. I mean, how can ChatGPT be used to model your workforce plan and your capacity planning? I know that that can be done. Your employer branding and recruitment marketing. Naturally, a lot of people are using AI and ChatGPT for content, copy, images, all of that stuff. For data and analytics, I think yes. So I think we just haven't seen it done in all these areas, but I think there will naturally be, yes, it will touch all of it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I think everyone, like, to Natalie's point, bringing up ChatGPT, it's like before doing anything, you should put it in ChatGPT and see if it can do it better than you. And then you just tweak the results that it spits out. And still, I forget sometimes to put certain prompts in there that I should be doing, but things like job descriptions, things like scorecards, things like hiring manager trainings, everyone should be asking ChatGPT to do that. And then we, the human, with the knowledge of our organization, judgment, needs, and obviously knowledge of the industry and what's appropriate and not when it comes to recruiting and HR, obviously it will need to be tweaked a lot to make it appropriate. But a lot of this work can, at least a step one of it, be done today with ChatGPT. So, yay.
Mm-hmm. So if there's no other questions, I would say thank you for joining us. We're going to have the recording on our YouTube channel. We'll obviously put it into Talent Collective as well in the session recordings. I will get the presentation uploaded. All the other stuff is there. And then one final plug for our virtual fireside tomorrow. I'm really curious, like this could be a really good segue into that conversation tomorrow, to see what some of those ladies are recommending as other areas that we could be spending our time as recruiters to, again, provide that value when hiring is a little bit slower. And the cool thing about the three of them is they all come from different sizes of organizations. So I'm really curious to hear, you know, Heike from Box is going to have a totally different experience or recommendation than, you know, the other two ladies. So hope to see you there tomorrow. If you're not already signed up, please do. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.